Hi guys, welcome back to my online tailoring course and I hope you're all well. This video we're going to concentrate on laying out our pattern onto our cloth, cutting our cloth, marking all the markings from our pattern pieces to the cloth ready so we can start construction. So I've just got the tools that we're going to use for this video. Obviously your pattern, if you've drafted one yourself, fantastic. If you've not had a go back and check some of the other videos that I've done already. If you're using a commercial pattern, that's fine, no issues at all. You'll need some cloth, obviously enough to complete, for this video is just about the jacket, but enough to complete the suit. A meter rule is really handy. It's also good to have a short ruler as well. I quite often use a quilting square ruler just for marking smaller pieces on your cloth. Obviously a tape measure, some pattern weights, they're really useful. We don't use pins, or I don't use pins because it distorts the cloth. So if you haven't got pattern weights, use anything heavy. So tins of baked beans, anything like that that you can put onto your pattern to hold it onto the cloth. Some shears, I've got some 13, 10s and 8-inch shears. That's primarily for cutting the cloth, nothing else. And a small pair of snips for cutting your threads, etc. If you're not happy or comfortable using shears, that's fine. If you want to use rotary cutter with a cutting mat, carry on. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. You'll need some basting thread, and I've mentioned this in previous videos. Some hand sewing needles. I use John James needles all the time, and it's up to you what type of needle you use, as in what size of needle. But when we're marking out, we're doing lots of basting and we're marking the seam lines onto the cloth. So I tend to use long darners. So they're probably nearly twice as long as a standard needle, and they're a bit finer, but they're a bit more flexible because you're going to be using Tailors Tacks and basting around on the table, so they just give you a little bit more flexibility. But again, it's up to you. Decent tailor's chalk, make sure you buy a good brand. They're not expensive. Some chalks tend to be a bit waxy, which makes them really hard to remove from the cloth, so just check, do a test on your cloth to make sure that you can rub it off. Make sure they're sharp, so you'll need a sharpener of some description. Like I say, this is my homemade one with some Stanley knife blades in it, and I just sharpen again. You can always sharpen using the back edge of a pair of scissors, nice and simple. And don't throw away your shavings, keep them in a little pot like I've said to you before. It's really good for transferring marks off of your pattern onto your cloth. So that's really all you'll need, and what we'll do now is we'll lay out pattern pieces and we'll go and cut the cloth. Okay, so I've got my cloth laid out on my table, and all I've done is I've folded it right sides together along the selvage. I always like to work on the wrong side of the fabric for putting the marks and things on. I've made sure this has got a pinstripe, so I've made sure that the pinstripes line up on both layers of the fabric, and all I've done to it is to very, very lightly press it with a warm iron, so not a really hot iron because I don't want to shrink anything, just to crease it very gently along the edge, so we're good to go. Now of course, make sure you check your fabric all the way, the whole length of your fabric, just make sure there's no imperfections anywhere, and if there are, circle them with a chalk. You don't want to cut a piece out and then find that you've got a slight irregularity in the cloth. If you've drafted your own pattern following me, then obviously you're not going to have a layout, so it's going to be judging where you lay your pattern pieces on your cloth, so you utilise the maximum amount of cloth and you don't waste any. One thing I will warn you is don't be tempted to put all your pattern pieces as close as you possibly can together, because we do want to allow a little bit of extra room, certainly on the front panel, the side panel and the back panel. We're going to cut a little bit extra fabric around on some of the seams, so we've got a little bit more to play with. Okay, one thing I like to do before I lay out is just make sure that the fabric is straight. Obviously this has got a pinstripe, so I can check with a ruler that the pinstripe is straight, and just make sure your cloth lines up. If you haven't got pinstripe or anything else, then obviously do it along the selvage and just make sure that the selvage itself is nice and straight. We'll start with the front panel, and I'm going to lay it on the cloth. I'm going to leave a little bit of room at the front, so obviously this is against the selvage, and we're going to measure from our grain line that we drew on the pattern piece to the selvage or to a pinstripe. Just make sure that your pattern piece is perfectly square to the grain. So once we've done that, get your pattern weights, your tins of beans, whatever it is you're going to use, just to weigh down your pattern, like so. Sharp piece of chalk, and make sure you sharpen all the edges. If it's triangular, obviously 3 sides. If it's a square rectangular piece of chalk, sharpen all the sides of it and make sure it's a really knife edge. Basically, we're going to chalk around our pattern piece. As you're going round, if the chalk starts to get a bit thick, go to another side, go to another side, and so on. If you've got to sharpen as you're going round, carry on. Make sure you get a really nice fine line all the way around the pattern piece. Don't press too hard. You only need to be able to see the chalk line, and carefully follow the shape of your pattern piece. Don't forget to mark in any balance marks or notches. We don't snip these. We're going to put Tailors Tacks in, so we mark where they are. Once you've gone all the way around, just lift your pattern carefully, just to make sure, like there for example, I've just missed one little bit. Make sure you can clearly see your pattern all the way around. Like so, all the way around, making sure the pattern stays in place. It's worth taking your time to do this. Okay, so we chalked all the way around our pattern piece. The next thing we're going to do is going to mark our lapel roll line and our dart position. Now, I think I told you in the last video or the video before, I punched some small holes along the lapel roll line. I also did a small hole at the top of the dart and at the bottom legs of the dart. I would do the same for any marks that need to go on the face of a pattern piece. So if I drawn the pocket in, I may have marked the 4 corners of the pocket, but I'll draw those in later on the cloth. So if you remember, I said always keep your chalk dust. So when you sharpen your chalk, hold your chalk dust, and all you need to do is rub a little piece through the holes like so. If you haven't yet collected chalk dust, you can use the back of your non-fabric scissors and you can literally scrape along the edge of your chalk to form some dust that you can then put through to the holes like so. Once you're happy, like I say, make sure you've got all your markings on, that you can see all the markings clearly. Remove your pattern weights and carefully lift off your pattern but put your pattern weights back on. You don't want to disturb the cloth, you want to keep it exactly where it was, and you should see your markings on there. As I say, if there's any bits, if you're missing a little bit, like I am there, just make sure you just fill them in exactly where they go. You've got your notches, a little bit on the shoulder. We can go ahead and we can draw our straight line along the lapel roll. So using the dots that you've marked through, go ahead and draw that in. Again with chalk. Like so. And we can mark the dart in place, so going from the top down to the bottom legs. Just going to move the weights carefully. I drew the dart with a French curve, so I'm going to use the same French curve. Like so. It's always good just to mark the top of the dart across, just to make sure you know where the top of your dart starts. Okay, so there's our front panel piece all chalked in place. Now at this stage I would go and place my backs, my sides and all the other bits and do exactly the same, but I'm going to do one pattern piece at a time for you just to make it clearer, just so you understand the processes. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark in our hem line, so where the hem's going to be folded up, and for this pattern I added 4 centimeters, 1.5 inches. Just be careful that this may be a slight curve if you're working on a commercial pattern. Take your time, just make sure that you're right. And we'll draw that one in. Let's use the right side of the ruler, that will help. Like so. We're now going to use Tailors Tacks, and we're going to tailor tack all the way around the outline of the pattern piece. We're going to go in where this is going to be cut out. We're going to tailor tack along our dart, along our roll line, along our hem line, certainly until it gets to the curve. And we're also going to tailor tack our notches or balance marks. Okay, quick rundown of Tailors Tacks. If you've never done them before, they're really simple. I've drawn a straight line just on a piece of cloth here to demonstrate. You'll need some basting thread or tacking thread, and then take a nice length and you're going to thread a needle with your thread doubled, so from top to bottom. Don't tie a knot in the end. I'm using a long darner, which is, you can see, is quite a bit longer than a standard needle. It's also quite flexible, which is good. And all we do is we start where we're going to do our tailor's tacks, needle in through both layers of fabric and out. It's just a running stitch, and I'm using, it's about 1 centimetre I'm using, so 1 centimetre gap, 1 centimetre worth of thread going through. And when we pull it through, we're going to leave a loop. Now how big the loop is up to you, but I'm just sort of going to demonstrate by putting my finger in there. It's about a finger's worth of loop, and I'll lie it down so you can see. And again, centimetre, centimetre, pull it through, leave a loop. Don't worry about it twisting up. And so on. And what this does, it allows you to transfer markings to both pieces of cloth at the same time. So you're not using tracing wheels or any other forms of marking. And Tailors Tacks, a lot of people think they're not very secure, they're going to fall out. Actually, they hold in place really well. As I say, the tacking thread or the basting thread is slightly fluffy, so it does stick to the cloth. So there we go, we just run along like so. When you get to the end of your thread, which you will do obviously when you're going round a large pattern piece, snip your thread but leave a long tail on it, like so. And when you're going to carry on, obviously with a fresh needle loaded with cotton, start back. So don't start right at the end, come back here a little bit and carry on like so. Now the joy with Tailors Tacks is they're in place. Yes, they look scruffy, but that doesn't matter, because what we're going to do now is you're going to separate the 2 layers of cloth. And we take our 2 layers of cloth and we gently pull the cloth apart like so, and you can see the legs of the thread coming through. And very carefully take some scissors, and making sure you don't cut your cloth, be really careful, just cut those little legs all the way along like so, and you'll have transferred your marks from both or onto both sides of the cloth, so you know that this line is going to be in the same position as this. I always fold my cloth right sides together, so I know that these little legs of thread coming up, that's going to be my right side, so I never get confused. And obviously on the wrong side you're going to see your standard sort of thread pattern. So that's Tailors Tacks. Take your time doing them, it's worth doing them. A lot of people will not bother, but actually it can make your life a lot easier. So here we go with Tailors Tacks. You're going through both layers of cloth, you're not tying any knots anywhere, and I'm using a long darner. I'm to leave that loop like so, and we're just going to go all the way around. Okay, so we've put all the tailor's tacks around, done our hemline, done our dart, and we've put a couple of tailor tacks in where our notches are, and obviously our lapel roll line. Now the first thing, just gently move all your tailor's tacks to the inside of your pattern, because you don't want to cut them when you're cutting the cloth out. So just move all those little loops just out the way. Now of course it looks really scruffy and messy at the moment, but it will all make sense in a minute when we cut everything out. First thing I'm going to do, and this is really just so you understand where I'm coming from, at the bottom of our roll line I'm going to just chalk a line out. Okay, we're going to cut from the top of our lapel, we're going to cut approximately 2 centimeters, 2.5 centimeters, so let's say an inch extra fabric away from the top of our lapel. When we get to this mark that I've just marked at the bottom of the roll line, we'll then taper back in, and we're going to cut approximately 3 millimeters or so, 1/8 of an inch, and we're going to follow our original chalk line all the way around till we get to this back edge. On this back edge we're going to cut again, I'm going to say 3/4 of an inch or 20 millimeters, 2 centimeters away from that. So along there and along there. Don't measure it, it doesn't have to be precise, because you've got your markings where your real edge is with the tailor's tacks. This just gives us a little bit of fabric to play with, because we will temporarily put the garment together, try it on, or try it on whoever you're making it for, and if we need to allow a little bit extra, let's say at the waist or below the waist or just under the underarm, you've got a little bit of fabric to play with, so you can mark it and say, well actually I need to have a little bit more. Conversely, if you need to come in a bit, that's not a problem, because you've got the fabric there anyway. At the front armhole, from the first notch, I'm going to mark out, and I'm going to follow the line approximately, and I'm definitely going to add 2.5 centimeters, 1 inch, like so. When we cut out, it's nice to have extra fabric, both at the back and the front, where your arm sits, for when you're putting your sleeve head roll. So we can now go and we can cut this piece out. Like I say, you would normally have done all your other pieces and followed the same procedure. I'll show you how to allow extra fabric for your sides and your back in a minute. If you're going to use your shears or scissors, a little tip for you. If you're right-handed, like I am, always keep the actual pattern or the pattern piece that you want to cut out to the right of your shears, because naturally when you're using scissors, so here I've got my scissors, as you cut, the waste fabric is always pushed to the left. Conversely, if you're left-handed, the scissors will be different obviously, the waste is pushed to the right. So when you're cutting, as you cut, so I'm going to come along here, I'm right-handed, fabric on the right, the waste fabric will be pushed away, so you're not messing up the actual pattern. So let's begin. Like I say, I'm going to come a good 2 centimeters, 2.5 centimeters from this original line, not measured, it's just approximate. And I've got down to this mark that I put into the bottom of the roll line. I'm now going to taper in, and I'm going to follow all the way around, say about 3mm. Make sure you don't cut your tailor's tacks at this point. You notice how the fabric, the waste fabric, is being pushed away from the pattern piece. You see, I can't talk and cut at the same time. It's very difficult. Just make sure, keep your tailor's tacks out of the way. Like so. Obviously, I'm trying to show you this. It's going to be very difficult for me to lean over and cut like I would normally with fabric to the right. So I'm going to cut down from the top. It will be better for you when you do it. Remember to allow this extra piece around the arm. Again, we're going to come in like so, and we're going to come around this bottom piece about 3mm, and we're going to extend it out, and we're going to come down 2cm away, and then 2cm away, like that. This out of the way. At the top of the shoulder, again, allow yourself at least 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch, if not a little bit more. Just so you've got some movement if you need it. And around the top of the lapel, coming in close again. Like cutting your tailor's tacks. Like so. We can remove our pattern weights as both pieces of fabric are now together, and I'll show you how we do the next step. Okay, so here's the finished front panels, so 2 layers of cloth obviously, tailor tacked all the way around like you've seen. We've got a couple of things to do. First, we've got our dart which runs down, and it's a displaced dart, so it finishes around waistline, or just below the waistline where the pocket's going to sit. So the dart finishes here and then is displaced to the side, and then when the dart is closed, this edge will come in flush, so it's a nice curve there. So we're just going to cut this little triangle out. It's already marked in. Again, just be careful you don't cut your tailor's tacks. And that goes to the front edge of the dart, so closest to the front. so just a small slither, and you can see there we've got this, and as I say, when the dart is closed, that will bring this seam line into the right shape. Okay, the next thing to do is separate the two layers of cloth, and I showed you briefly how we do that. Literally pull the cloth, pull your tailor's tacks so you get your nice little thread legs. Take your time doing this, because as you work across the cloth, you're going to have to change the angle, obviously, for the roll line. You're going to have to come from the top for the top seam, come back when you get to the middle for your dart. Just, take your time, don't rush it. We want to make sure that we get and keep all those Tailor tacks in place. So I'll go ahead and do that, and with the magic of technology, I'll be able to do it quickly. So there we go. That's the right side of our fabric. So you can see the little legs with the tailor's tacks all the way around. See the hemline, obviously you can see the dart. You can see the balance mark for the side seam. You can see our front shoulder arm notch. I'll just trim this jagged bit off the bottom, like so. And as I say, when this dart is closed up, like that, that will bring this side into shape. Okay, so that's it for the front panels. They're all done, ready to go. So you know the right side because you've got the legs coming through if you folded your cloth right sides together. Put them to one side carefully. The tacks will pull out if if you handle it roughly. So just be gentle with it. What I like to do is put them back together like so, and then I like to just gently roll them up so everything stays together, and we know that's our front panel complete. So okay, on to the other panels, the other pattern pieces. I'm not going to run through the same procedure. I'm not going to put it on the cloth and make you watch it all again. Do as you did for the front panel. Put your side panel down. Make sure your grain line is accurate with your cloth. Trace round with your chalk. Mark your notches, and then put your tailor tacks in. Take your pattern piece off, marking your hemline, tailor tack that. When we cut it out, we're going to cut really close to the tailor's tacks along the back of the vent. So I'm having a double vent on mine. Close to the hem, I'm talking 2 or 3 millimeters. On the front edge, however, we're going to come out 3/4 of an inch, 2 centimeters, and we're going to cut the fabric with the extra inlay. Around the armhole, you can cut that close across the top. And similarly, on this back top edge, we're going to allow 2 centimeters, 3/4 of an inch extra material, just in case we need to do any adjustments for fitting. So that's the centre panel. For the back panel, again, exactly the same procedure. Line up grain, chalk, Tailor tack. This time for the centre back seam here, we're going to allow that extra 2 centimetres, 3/4 of an inch of fabric when we cut it out. Around the neck, it's as it is, so close. Along the shoulder, to the top shoulder, add that extra bit of fabric. Around the arm is fine, and this back, or the front side seam, so where it joins onto your side panel, add the extra 2 centimetres, 3/4 of an inch, and on the vent you can come close, and obviously along the hem. It just gives us a little bit of play for the back. We can, if we needed to, we could let the back out slightly. You shouldn't need to, but it's better to have a little bit extra fabric than obviously not enough. And we're only working with 1 centimetre seam allowances, so we just give that little bit extra. And again, like I say, for the shoulder. So that would be the back. You cut out. The sleeves, so the upper and lower sleeve, same thing. Line up your grain, chalk round, Tailor tack all the way around it, mark all your points. Now I did make a mistake when I was drafting this, and one of my followers said, hang on, my sleeve head is too big to fit into the arm. Obviously they did a test, and I thought, no, it's not, that's right. And I went back and I checked my pattern, it was fine, it was exactly as I always did. What I did do wrong was I said that it was a 1 centimetre seam allowance all the way around, and it's not. It's a 1 centimetre seam allowance when you sew it into your armhole, but the side seams, and there, is 1.5 centimetres or 5/8 of an inch. Obviously that will make the sleeve head a good inch smaller than it was by using a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So anyway, with the sleeves you can cut those, say, mark them all out, Tailors tack, and you can cut them close all the way around. You don't need to add anything. So that covers what you need to do. You can go away, cut all your pieces of fabric out following the steps that I've shown you, and get everything ready for the next video, where we will be iron working the fabric to shrink it and stretch it in certain places, just to give us a bit more ease and a bit more shaping. Any questions, drop me a message, and until then, I'll see you next time.